Arianna Huffington is the co-founder of the Huffington Post, one of the most widely read news websites in the US. And I asked her if some of the more outlandish claims about Obama being the Antichrist and the death threats that have been circulated actually help supporters of the president manage expectations of what the Democrats can actually achieve.
I don't think anybody likes that. I think everybody who cares about America and cares about our democracy knows that you can have passionate disagreements, but when they veer into the land of fantasy, it's very dangerous for the democracy. That's why, you know, in our Constitution, we have exceptions to the First Amendment that have to do with yelling fire in a crowded theater. Now, I'm not suggesting that there are any restrictions to our free speech, which is pretty sacred in this country, but it shows why there were exceptions, because words do have consequences. And right now we see many manifestations of violence. We see bricks being thrown through congressional windows and threats of assassination, and all those very dangerous indications that people, when they're afraid and anxious, as they are in this country at the moment, believe a lot of outlandish things.
But as far as the effect on actual policy is concerned, it is striking how what is fundamentally a very non-radical healthcare reform bill is being hailed by the liberal establishment. It still leaves 25 million people uninsured. It puts more money in the insurance companies. It has the threat of bankruptcy or jail for the poorest in society. It discriminates against women and the elderly. And this is being hailed by the liberal establishment. How low are your expectations right now?
Well, first of all, you know, I have written quite a lot about how deeply flawed the bill is and how it does make way too many concessions to the pharmaceutical industry and the health insurance industry. But it is definitely a major first step away from a very broken status quo. And the fact that the health insurance industry was fighting it tooth and nail towards the end is proof of that. But this is really the first step, and it's being acknowledged as being the first step that needs to be improved, that needs to be made much better, and that needs to deal with issues like prevention and other factors that are critical for cost containment.
But I mean, what this says about the Obama administration to some is, yes, you know, he can get these things through, but they're deeply compromised, and those on the progressive side of the argument are too frightened really to fight him because they're worried about the alternative. This is just going to embolden Obama for perhaps more, and the Democratic Party for more compromises. There's already wishy-washy language on immigration reform and financial regulation and so forth. This is the status quo. It just has a different face.
Well, there is no question that right now lobbyists and campaign contributions are having a major impact in both political parties. And we'll see when it comes to financial reform how bold and significant it's going to be. And I agree with you, it's very important that there is real financial reform, that there is a real jobs program beyond the $15 billion bill that was passed by the Senate, because right now the greatest danger in America is that the middle class is crumbling. With so many people out of work, so many people's homes being foreclosed, so many bankruptcies, we are having an unprecedented situation in America where there is downward mobility instead of upward mobility, and that has deeply profoundly troubling consequences, both economically, politically, and even psychologically.
Right, but I suppose there were similar comparisons to be made on you know, a for-profit healthcare system and the trouble that was causing, and yet this is the compromise we got. And from a foreign policy angle, there are parallels too for many of these marvelous speeches from Obama, these marvelous aspirational goals, but then in the end we get a rather reactionary platform of a rather neocon agenda for Iran, escalation of the war in Afghanistan, rewarding coup plotters in Latin America, an almost masochistic ability to be insulted by the Israeli Prime Minister. Again, we wonder whether it's all talk and it just leads to the same old status quo of American foreign policy in this case.
Well, there's definitely been a dramatic shift in the policy towards Israel. I mean, after all, as you know, George Bush did not leave any daylight between his administration and the Israeli government. And here, there is a very clear difference when it comes to the settlements. What I would argue is that the administration's policy on Afghanistan is extremely misguided, that in fact especially because of the civilian casualties, the unintended consequences of our policy there, we are making America even more deeply unpopular in the region, and therefore we're exacerbating the tendencies in the region that are very destructive for this country.